let's have a conversation. You know, conversation. Not converse or contrary, but conversation. Let's try and see if maybe you and I can communicate. You know, that's what conversation does. It's a communication. It's talking, relating information, discussion, participating in debate, discussion, what we call argument without it being an argument, but having a conversation. So if you're expecting somehow to have a solution, that's not why I'm sharing or talking to you. If you're expecting to come up with a realization, that's not really why I'm having a conversation. I'm having a conversation because I want to talk about, I want to converse, I want to relate information. I want to think about and ponder and consider things that maybe in your conversation you haven't had that opportunity to talk about. The first thing I wanted to do was I want you to watch carefully. And you can see how I look right now, kind of like, you know, some old man, you know, that just got out of bed, you know, and hadn't cleaned up or washed his face. And in a lot of ways, you would be accurate. I'm appearance-wise, appearing-wise, pretty healthy, I mean, somewhat, you know, looking man in his 50s, apparently, you know, if you look close. Kind of old looking, you know, kind of like silver-haired and all that kind of stuff, you know. And what you see is what you get, basically. So if I suddenly decided to maybe do a few things that I was told by a friend of mine to do, he gave me this hat. Now, interesting enough, this is just a hat. It is a typical, normal baseball cap. It says eagle on it, but it happens to have a kind of an embroidered eagle and kind of like all these other things around it, you know, and it's kind of like nothing special about it. Nothing unique, nothing you can't buy in a store anywhere else. Now if I put this hat on, I can wear it in a variety of ways. Each time that I change the way I'm wearing the hat, it causes a certain amount of reaction in people. One of the things you don't know that I'm going to show you is that I can create a very obvious reaction with some people watching. If I put my hat on like this, and I put my glasses on, and I suddenly hunch my shoulders forward and stare at you, do you know what some people where I live automatically assume? I'm parole officer. Because you see, part of the parole officer's venue is they have certain things that in the law enforcement has been a habit, a tradition, something that they know and they're aware of. They wear certain hats. They do certain things that are kind of like Americanized or over-the-top patriotism, meaning like with the eagle. And the interesting thing was that a lot of people in my area, especially with gangs and with criminal element or people that have transgressed the law or somehow come into contact on a regular basis with law enforcement and with probation, happen to know this particular style, particular look, particular appearance. And I find that interesting because I tried it, I've done it, and I've used it. And I've used it in a sense of preventing or stopping from certain actions occurring. People would say that I was profiled as being a probation officer. Now, I worked in security, and I remember when I worked in Burns security, or was it Pinkerton? Burns, no, Pinkerton. When I worked in Pinkerton security in the state of Washington, Pinkerton security at that time had a blue shirt. The blue shirt was the exact same uniform, almost to the T, of state troopers. Every time someone saw me, they assumed I was a state trooper. I mean, we were down to the max. We looked like state troopers. I kind of liked it. I enjoyed it at the time. I made use of it. Such as it was at the time that I was working in security. When I was younger, I was hair down to here. Really long hair. I was treated with less than respect because I was a hippie. I wore serape, I wore onk, I wore long hair. I didn't wash my hair too often, so it's kind of greasy. I was kind of like, pretty hippie-ish. And I was treated as a hippie, and I was accepted as a hippie. And as a matter of fact, anywhere I went, when I went to Mexico, they even called me hippie. But it was interesting. I really wasn't a hippie. I was more like an intellectual, you could say beatnik, in disguise as a hippie. I only had long hair because it was a style. But I did notice that when I was growing up, after I got and became a Christian, that people treated me different when I had long hair. As a matter of fact, I can tell you right now that with my beard, people treat me different. Some older people respect me as an older man, and they look at me and they go, oh, yeah, okay, hey, how's it going? And they relate to me. And it doesn't matter their skin color or whatever, they just see me as an old man, and I'm an old man. Until I add maybe an attitude. But then, when I put down the attitude, I'm treated as kind of goofy, or silly, or fun-loving. And it's funny because I didn't change, but perspectives about me did. The way that people looked at me did. The way that people treated me changed each time that I changed my appearance. Now, I learned that very early in my life as a young 20-year-old that, when I went to work, I had to clean up my act. I had to straighten up, clean up, and act right and be right in order to get a job. And then in that job, I had to do what the job required. That job required me to act, look, and be a certain way. If it required a suit and tie, I squared my shoulders, I put my head up, I was back, and I acted in that way. Now you see, when I square my shoulders, it's interesting. My chest comes up. Am I puffed up? No. It just happens to be a natural effect of actually having good posture, straightening your back, and throwing your shoulders back. Matter of fact, when I tuck in my chin, and I look straight you in the eye, and I determine not to show any emotion, if I do something right now, you're going to identify me as something else, aren't you? Watch and see if you agree. A Marine. Now you see, it's interesting, because I can sit here, I don't look like a Marine, I don't act like a Marine, I don't even F like a Marine now, but I was in the Marine Corps. Interesting is that if I shaved my head and kept short hair and put the sidewalls on, I'd be treated like a Marine. I'd be treated, because I was in the service, with respect. Now, me personally, I think that's stupid. No offense. I was in the Corps and I saw how corrupt so much of the Corps was in my day. When I was growing up as a child, I saw the guy they put in charge of the investigation of El Toro Marine Corps Base, investigating who was stealing all the supplies off of El Toro Marine Corps Base, bringing all the supplies over to my mother. Corruptly. Gunny sergeant. Dare I say, And then when I saw how people could buy their orders for getting out of Nam, when I had to go to, or was going to be shipped to Nam, that was interesting. Matter of fact, Nam kind of opened up your eyes to what the military does do, can do, and often is about in a lot of ways that maybe you don't know about. But the people in the Marine Corps do, and they know. They know what's going on. Doesn't mean you have to participate in it. Doesn't mean you're a crook, but doesn't mean you have been a criminal element. If you did it, you were. But people now today, oh yeah, you're in the military. God bless you. Sorry you had to kill people. Thank you for doing it. Yeah, I just don't get that part of it exactly. So, we'll just skip that for now. Let's just set that all aside. The idea of being respected just because I was wearing a uniform. Oh, really? Now, wait a minute. You mean you respect me now? Because you hated me then? Because you see, I remember being hated as a veteran, a Vietnam era veteran. I remember going in Long Beach VA hospital and getting people protesting outside my hospital bedroom door about the war. I remember that. And now, ooh, we want to honor you. For what? What changed? What's the difference? Why am I different, or am I different than I was then? Nope, I wasn't, was I? So you see, perspectives change, attitudes change, people change. People changed in my lifetime that short a period of time. Matter of fact, I can show you how fast things change. Watch this. Remember, we're having conversation. We're not trying to make a point here. We're trying to discuss things. We're trying to talk about things. We're trying to relate information. How'd you react to that? Did you check it? Did you go, huh, hit, yeah. What's a Marine doing? Hip-hop. Should I put on some bling in order to bring about the same reaction? Is there a difference in me that I know how to dress, how to act, how to be, how to chill it, how to kill it? Interesting, isn't it? You see, the nation is going through a really challenging time where people are manipulating each other. People are talking about things without having a conversation about them. They are trying to make things appear different than what they are. Because you see, I can appear to be a lot of things. And in a lot of ways, I've been those things. I've been a Marine. I've been a cook. I've been an executive. I can put on a suit and tie, as I did one time. I was actually at a church. I was working in a church, and I every day came into my coveralls because every day I had work to do, and I just wore coveralls that I had from woodcutting because I've been a woodcutter, and I'd go underneath the church, and I'd work in the dirt and the slop and slime and, kind of clean things up, and I'd get all filthy and grimy, and, my fingers got calluses, and I got dirt on my hands, and I got dirt under my nails, and, I came out, just looking groggy and all that stuff all the time, and people went, wow, look at him. He's a hard worker. That guy, man, he ought to be a deacon. He ought to be a worker, or whatever. What do we call him? A greeter, or he ought to be, one of those people. One of those servants, that serve in the church. That work behind the scenes, doing the dirty work. Dress dirty, look dirty, be dirty. So, I didn't pay much attention to it. It was a missionary outreach. It was a baby church getting started, or trying to revive it, bring it up and grow it up. And so after a while, the pastor, he was doing his thing. So I decided, after praying, I think I'll take my suits out. I started wearing a suit every Sunday night and every Wednesday night. And I decided to greet people at the door and watch the parking lot. I had prayed about it. I had thought about it. I had talked to God about it, so I went ahead and did it because I wanted to, I guess, God wanted to make a point, because these people were kind of farm community, and they were a little bit, kind of like stereotyping people. So I wore a suit, and I would greet them, and as I wore the suit, notice my hands clasped themselves. I acted differently. I behaved differently. My articulation, my considerations were very formal, were very proper, were very personal, and were very real. As a matter of fact, a lot of people of the other class, and there are classes in our country that elevated themselves or feel elevated, felt very connected to me. Suddenly they began to talk to me. They related to me. They paid attention to me. They carried on a conversation with me, and I carried on the conversation at their level. I talked to them. I listened to them. Interesting thing was that, one time a guy came along and he says, "This black shirt." I said, "Check it." And the guy looked at me like, how could check it come out of a guy in a suit? He started laughing. I started laughing. He goes, "Where'd you come from?" "Wonder Bread." I said, "Don't tell me I'm Wonder LA." And it was just one of those things. We teased each other because he dropped his gang slang, and I dropped my attitude, and we began to talk, and he was well educated. He put on airs in order to come to visit this church that was out in the middle of nowhere, that was in the Bergs, that was in this tiny, tiny, tiny community that, he wanted to be like, big fish, little pond. Interesting, isn't it? Having this conversation, how I'm the same person, and yet in all of this time that we've been spending together, I've been able to relate to different ethnic groups, to different status groups, to different groups that come from different backgrounds, to different people from different social standings, to people from different income standings. And I've been in those income standings, all of them. And I have found in each and every one of them pride, prejudices, misunderstandings, attitudes, egos, sensitivities, insensitivities. I've never found one worse than the other. You see, I found them all wrong, and I found them all right. And whenever it dealt with me personally, I've watched how that person changed before my eyes. A long time ago, I was taught something very interesting that a man, a preacher, I'll admit, a church leader, told me. His name was Romaine, and he said, the best way to grow as a Christian, matter of fact, he said the only way to grow as a Christian, effectively, is to go and find the person you hate, that you can't stand sitting next to, that you just absolutely abhor, and make a friend of him. I thought he was crazy. I thought he was nuts. Matter of fact, my attitude at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in the early days of the Jesus movement was one of, I'll prove him wrong. So I went out and did it. And I proved him right. I have gone to a lot of churches. I've been a part of a lot of different ministries at different times, sometimes long-term, sometimes short-term. But in all of them, I have seen people that whenever I had a problem with someone, if it continued to be a problem and I realized that my attitude was wrong, that my actions were wrong, that my intentions, my problems with them, my contentions, whatever it was that was going on in me, even if it was right, like say, somebody is one of those, and not one of these, or not one of me's, but, it's just a person, with issues, like everyone, that once I began to work at and decided, I'm doing this, Lord, and you need to help me, I made friends with them. And some of them, most of them, actually all of them, I think, I made best friends out of. They never knew how I felt about them initially. One or two might have, because there may be one or two that could handle it in the end. I told them. I said, I hated your guts when I met you. He says, that's no problem, so did I. I was like, now, die for each other. And that's the point. You don't know until you go quite a bit farther than where you're at with your discussions or conversations. You don't know really what's going on with this whole thing in the country about Trayvon or about Zimmerman, because that's not the issue. You see, it doesn't matter whether it was a black man, a white man, an Indian chief, a robber, a thief, or a baker, a butcher, or a candlestick maker. The issue is being used by politics, media, the family of the deceased, people that are making money off of it, like lawyers, the court systems, the judiciary systems. Everybody's involved. And you have to realize that when something gets blown out of proportion, that means every detail is blown out of proportion. Remember, we're having a conversation here. We're just talking about it. We're not saying, oh, well, are you trying to tell me there's not racial issues? Of course there's racial issues. Matter of fact, I'll tell you this story. I had hair down to my shoulders, and I went to go visit my stepdad's family in Houston, Texas. The Gooches. They were in Houston. They worked for one of the big oil companies. Can't even remember. Oh no, they worked for DuPont. That's what it was, DuPont. My grandmother, I guess she would be, Mrs. Gooch. I came off of the airport onto the tarmac, and she immediately came up to me, put her arm around me, in my arm, and we walked right over to the airport barber and got a haircut. And I got the shortest haircut I'd had since the Marine Corps, because you don't have long hair in Houston. Not in those days. I would have been annihilated. I was a young kid, and it was, as a matter of fact, it was before I was still in high school. So I wound up getting a haircut, and then as I got to know the people that my stepdad had come from, it was very obvious where they came from and what they were about, because I was one time walking home from something I had gone to go see, and they said, "Well, where did you go?" And I said, "I went down L Street," and they go, well, to put it bluntly, they stopped. I mean, it was one of those, like, everyone in the room shocked, stopped, stared, silent. And I looked at them and I went, I was waiting for them to say something. They didn't say anything. I said, L Street. And they didn't say nothing. You see, L Street was where the black slums were. If it's L Street, I can't remember what street it was. But I remember walking down the street, and I was like, oh, cool. Because, I was grew up in different neighborhoods. So, when I walked down L Street, I saw some people, and I started rapping with them. I started talking to them, having a conversation. I was like, hey, how's it going? And they were like, first there was attitude, anger, kind of like hostility. Oh, fine. Jerk. They were like, I don't care. Went on. A jerk's a jerk, no matter who you are. And so what's kind of interesting was that when I dropped the L word, literally, man, it was like silence. And then I was quietly later told by one person, with no one else listening, why I couldn't go down to L Street. So from then on, I went down to L Street after dark. I was an honorary kid. But you see, I've always gone places where people said you can't go. In Jerusalem, I was told that, hey, don't go into East Jerusalem. That's, the Arabs live there. They'll kill you. It was like, Arabs, right. I'd already pretty much, by the time I moved, or I lived in Israel for a while, I'd already pretty much eliminated people that talk about lump summing everyone into one category. And I was kind of amazed to, go over to East Jerusalem and enjoy it and have fun, because it wasn't that I was amazed to find that. I was laughing at the hypocrisy of people that said, don't go over there, and yet they were coming over to buy cheap eggs. They were coming over to buy cheap olive oil. They were coming over to East Jerusalem to get things that they didn't want to pay the extra price that kosher was in the rest of Jerusalem, or in Mahane Yehuda, in downtown Jerusalem in the market, where they mark up prices. No, a lot of people, I saw a lot of people that I went, huh, yeah, okay, tell me again, don't go over in East Jerusalem. And I saved a lot of money that way by going over to East Jerusalem, buying my groceries there instead of, in the Mercado, or, in the, not Mercado, but in the store, and then also in the open air market, that everybody goes to. I bought groceries there too, like for not necessarily that's taken care of. But I found it interesting that even then, I could still find and look and see people that really just didn't understand. People. They didn't know because they didn't go, and then they wouldn't admit it because they were around other people. Because they were around other people, they acted like those people they were around. So they had assembled together in the other part of Jerusalem and wouldn't go over to East Jerusalem or tell people that. Then they would go. They stayed apart. I find that interesting because, I see that happening a lot in America, and always has been. Though we, like to put a spin on it, put nice clothes on, and dress ourselves up and get ourselves cleaned up in order to do our job, we say, oh, we don't have a problem. But then you get a bunch of people together, and I can tell you this. I can put 50 white people, Anglo-Saxon, of a certain style, nature, and whatever you want to call it, together, and they will feel like they are persecuted, attacked, under the gun, being treated unfairly. I can take 50 people in another ethnic group, whether African American, black, Negro, whatever you want to call it. I mean, come on, give me a break. You know. Ghanaian, Caucasian, let's get some unusual circumstances. It's kind of like when someone told me there's no black Jews, I laughed at them. I said, really? You know, but anyways, take a bunch of people of a dark skin. We'll say black just for the sake of argument because of the thing going on in the country. Put them in one room and they'll tell you up and down, all along, all those 50 people of the same ilk that, oh, they're persecuted and they're beat up and they're treated, you know, with disrespect and everything else. I can take 50 Jews, and by the way, you can't get 50 Jews in one room without arguing. But anyways, say we could get 50 Jews in one room. Hey, you give me 50 Jews in one room, I'll tell you exactly that they're going to feel like they're persecuted, even if they are 50 Jews that are wealthy. Even the wealthy Jews will tell you that. But there are a lot of poor Jews around, by the way, in case you're wondering. I could take 50 Latinos, and they'll say the same thing. I could take 50 Nicaraguans, and they'll say the same thing. I could take 50 Chileans. I could take 50 Cubans. I could take 50 Bedouin. I could take 50 Israeli. Everyone, when they get together, always feel like they're the ones that are suffering. Do you notice that? Do you realize that? Do you understand that? I mean, because we're just having a conversation. Try it and see. Because, you know, when you get around, you know, different people, you act differently. Unless you have something called integrity. Now, the integrity of your own integrity is dependent upon what the kind of integrity you have. But the point is that, hey, I'm one that's looking on the outside saying, you know what? Everyone's got issues. Everyone's got the problem. What you see is not what you get. What you see is being manipulated so that they can get what they want. So, like, right now in the country, when you see things like, oh, I don't know, supposedly this big issue about some court case being not right, or, you know, like when we had the Rodney King riots, you know, about, well, that's not fair. Or we have issues where, you know, some guy says, hey, you know what, I'm being discriminated. I think we ought to get rid of the anti-discrimination law because I'm white now, and guess what? This is a black college. I want to go to a black college. Some ways, when one guy said, you know, a senator recently, you know, and you know, they say he was insensitive, but he was being sensitive to his own feelings. He said, get over it. Let's be real. Get over it. Everybody has issues and problems and situations and circumstances where they feel like they're the ones. And if I came alongside you and said, hey, come here, let me tell you something. I found this law. I can get you $10,000 if you just sign this deal, and I will sue the snot out of somebody in order to get you what you want. Are you going to sign on the dotted line? Of course you are. If you get sued, let's just say you're minding your own business and somebody walks up to you and says, I want $10,000, and here's a court judgment that says, I get $10,000 from you. You're going to go, oh my God. And you're going to go out and get a lawyer, aren't you? To defend yourself, because you don't know how to defend yourself. You don't know how to protect yourself from those kinds of things. What's happening is people are in it for themselves. When you see a lot of national news, you can even see things like court cases and TV shows where they show, we need to prep the witness. Listen to the words. We need to prepare the witness to testify. Why do you have to prepare them? And what do you have to prepare them for? To lie? No, to look like how we can influence something for our benefit. You see, in court, a lot of times people don't care what the truth is. They don't care what the facts are. They want to win. And every prosecutor in the country will tell you what their success rate is. because they want to win. And every defense lawyer will tell you the same thing, because they want to win. Do you begin to get the picture? The conversation is about, why don't we have the conversation and keep conversations about what are for conversations, and keep communication for what our communication is, and keep what you see is what you get. Maybe discuss that sometimes about, hey, was there a mistake made, and can we have a conversation about it? Or was there no mistake made, and can we have a conversation about it? Because if you can't have a conversation, you can't arrive to the conclusion. And you'll never solve the issues, because you're being manipulated by pushing up, digging up, fluffing up. Have you ever noticed, like in a court case, whenever they're arguing about things, they always want to find the dirt. You know, oh, well, that guy is, that guy, he saw what he saw. This guy saw what he saw. This guy is like, we know he saw that. Matter of fact, there were 5 people that saw what he saw. Oh, but we can't use him. Well, why not? Well, he's got a bad history. He's had problems with the law. He's had problems with lying. He's had problems with whatever. Oh, so you want a perfect witness? Well, yeah, basically. We want a perfect witness that we can throw up there so that it doesn't taint what we're presenting. Wow. People right now in the country supposedly are running to say, we want justice. No, they don't. They want a ban. People are saying, we want the facts. No, they don't, because they don't accept the facts. They want their solution. People are saying, we want our side to win. Not really. They want their side to win, period, so that they can move on to the next issue. As a matter of fact, if you can have this conversation, and we opened up the reality of how we would say truth or dare, I dare you to tell the truth. Really. That's what my truth or dare is to you. On this issue of Trayvon Martin or Zimmerman or whatever, I dare you to tell the truth. Don't you want what you want rather than want the truth? Because God can give you the truth. We could ask God to reveal the truth. But do you really want that? I mean, bottom line, if you reject God, fine, I understand that. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, if there is a God, or if there is somebody that has a video camera that would show you exactly what happened, would you accept it? Would you, Trayvon Martin's mother, okay, just to be sad for a minute, and I don't want to do it to her, but let's be sad for a minute. And I'm sorry, but let's just be real, because we're having a conversation. If the camera was on from every angle, and the facts show that Trayvon was like, strutting his stuff, and then he saw, this guy, and he just kept going, and he kind of looked back and saw the guy following him, and kept going and looked back and said, what are you doing? What do you want? And they suddenly got in a scuffle, and they started chomping on him and stomping on him and beating him, and then the guy screams out and shoots him like, the court case says. As Trayvon's mother, see all the facts, do you think she's going to say, yep, my son got what he deserved? Come on. She's a mother. Hello? Let's be real. People that are like me, they come up and they say, yeah, but if I'm stupid, then I ask you, deserve to be paying the stupid price. I want mercy and grace. I want to be forgiven. I don't want the consequences of my actions. I don't want to pay for what I've done. I don't want to be responsible for what I'm doing. Believe me. And that's the majority of everyone whenever you get caught in the act. When you're wrong, you don't want to admit it. Of course not. Because you see, that's not what the court case is about, and that's not what's going on in the country. No one wants to admit they're wrong. Everyone wants to prove they're right. So, think about that. Truth or dare? And I'm daring you. Are you ready for the truth? That's what the conversation's about. truth. Because when you find out the truth, will you accept it? I mean, it'll all come out someday, you know. Eventually, you know, one of the family members will say, well, you know, it's kind of like, well, yeah, you know, I knew he was kind of like, you know, a rough kid or whatever, you know. The lawyers pushed us into it, you know. They kind of like, you know, they kind of egged us on something. And the media, you know, they told us this, you know, and everybody kept coming around and telling us, you know, we could get this and we could get that, and, you know, now we're famous, you know, we got this, that, and I got a book deal, you know, coming. But now I want to have another book deal, and I want to tell the real story, the real facts of what happened. And, you know, maybe if we live so long, 50 years from now, you know, somebody will tell the true story. Or let's be devil's advocate for a minute, or the opposite side of the coin, or however you want to say it. Say down the road, you know, Trayvon or Zimmerman's feeling, you know, like bad and terrible and horrible, or, you know, everything's gone wrong in his life, and somehow something else came up and something else came up, and he finally sits down and says, you know, I'm going to come clean. I did it. Here's the whole way it happened. Here's what happened, blah, blah, blah. Writes a book, you know, tells the whole story. The truth. Truth or dare? Are you willing to accept the truth? I dare you. Really. That's my truth or dare. Because in having this conversation, that's what you have to kind of like, you know, realize. On one level, things aren't fair. It's not fair that I can put on a certain amount of clothes, put on a certain resume, put on a certain style, put on a certain persona, and I can get good paying jobs. And maybe you can't. And I don't mean about the color of your skin either. I mean just because of the resume. That's profiling. Or because of the suit I wear. That's profiling. Or because of my qualifications. That's profiling. Or because I'm qualified and I'm the best person for the job. That too is profiling. You see, there's a certain amount of profiling in everything we do. It's called profiling. Now, people want to use that for their own reasons, so they come up with their own explanation of what profiling is. But a profile is a profile. It's who you presented yourself to be. My profile today, wearing a suit and tie with all my credentials, is what I'm showing. Now, if you investigate my profile and you find after I'm hired down the road that I have a whole made up resume, then my profile was a lie. It wasn't the truth. It wasn't actual. It wasn't factual. But at the time that you hired me, that was my profile. You profiled me by my presentation of who I was. You're beginning to get the picture? What you see isn't necessarily what you get. Truth or dare is always a challenge, because I dare you, when you find the truth, if you won't admit, of course it's profiling, and that's not the conversation. Of course there are issues in the country, and that's not the conversation. Of course there are all kinds of circumstances that are issues separately, but that's not what the issue is in this court case. No, at all. What's going on in the country right now is really the issue. And what's going on in the country is, very simply put, it one way. Because if you took out all the pieces, if you take away the money that everybody's getting, I mean everyone, lawyer gets paid, a judge gets paid, everybody gets paid somewhere. If you take all the money out, let's say you had to do it on a pro bono basis. Take all the publicity out. Say you had to do it on a, nobody knows basis. Take all the circumstances out of everyone watching. Take everything out of it except for just the details. Do you think the case would be the same? Do you think the issues would be the same? Would people react? If you didn't know, would you have reacted? Of course not. Because you didn't know. That's obvious. So as you begin to understand that, as you begin to realize that what you know is limited, and it's pretty much you don't know it all, then you can maybe at least have a handle on truth or dare, and maybe not want to dare to know the truth, because you may want to take the dare instead. And my dare is just as simple as my dare to, I dared you to accept the truth, Now my truth is this, do you want the truth? The truth is, you're being manipulated. And that's it. Zimmerman's being manipulated. The publicity is being manipulated. The courtroom's being manipulated. The community is being manipulated. There are social, quote-unquote, leaders manipulating. There are equal rights, supposedly, people manipulating. Everyone's manipulating. It's man in it. It's man, I pull an action out, or I manipulate. Take it apart. Man, I pull a tid. I ate it. I eat. I pull it to eat it the way I want it. I make it into what I want it to be. I manipulate it. I cook it. I spin it. So you can take truth or dare with me. I dare you to admit the truth to yourself. That you don't want the truth. Or you can take the truth. You're being manipulated. The bottom line is, in this conversation, it's your choice. It's just a conversation.